I'm Sarah Edwards. I work with the New Black Film Collective, and I'm super excited to be joined by a really stellar panel today for our Black Hollywood Calling Perfecting Your Product Pitch panel and our last session at both the online part of day 4 of Expo. So last session on our last day, which is very exciting. So bear with me real fast. So the focus of our talk today will be on perfecting your project pitch. So as I said, we've got 3 wonderful panelists that are here to share their expertise with you. So we'll talk a bit about pitching a project, but we'll also talk about things that are a little bit more broadly applicable to having a career in the industry and making sure that it's sustainable. But before all that, this is a presentation that is supported by BYP Network. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about them and about Javelin. So BYP Network was created to address the need to connect Black professionals and students from all over the world for things such as role model visibility, career opportunities, business support, and ultimately to help us solve our own problems. The main goal is really to change the Black narrative and advance the careers of millions of Black professionals using the AI powers of Javelin. So the founder of BYP is Kike, and Kike has really dedicated her work to advancing the careers of Black professionals across the globe. And part of this initiative includes the recently launched Javelin, a AI-powered career advancement platform, which is used to advance the career of millions of Black professionals by helping them access jobs, mentorship, events, and content. So users can join industry and location-based groups to gain knowledge, network, and upskill their content. You can sign up to Javelin by visiting javelin.byp.network/dashboard, and I will certainly put this in the chat later so you can look at it, and we will also have a QR code available at the end of the webinar. So back to our actual talk today. So as a general overview of how we're going to tackle things today, we'll start with an introduction from all of our panelists, then we'll talk a bit about pitching a project, any other insights that we can gain from them, and then we'll try to have questions at the end for our audience Q&A, and then we'll wrap things up. So I will go ahead and turn the floor over to our wonderful speakers today. We have Melody Cooper joining us, as well as Edwin Walker and NK Gutierrez, and I think that they can all do a much better job of introducing themselves and the many, many different things that they all do very, very successfully. So I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and I will turn things over to Melody first.
Okay, hi, hello everyone. How do I introduce myself? I'll start by how I started out in entertainment. I started as a professional actor in New York, and then I became a playwright, and through that started writing film and television. After I won the Grand Jury Prize for Urban World Film Festival for a feature film, I shortly after that I got into the HBO writing program, and during that program I was staffed on my first television show. I'm a sci-fi and horror writer primarily, but I've worked across genres, and from there I was in the HBO program. During that program I was staffed on 2-sentence horror stories. I've also worked on Law and Order SVU, and I was most recently a co-producer on Power Book for Force, and I've done the Sundance Episodic Lab as well, and won a fellowship through them. I've written a feature for Netflix, a fantasy feature, and sold a show to Netflix. And I am constantly pitching. Just had one yesterday, so I'm happy to share what I know about it. I also write comic books, and I also direct. So I'll talk about probably the idea that being multifaceted only helps you when you're pitching and in general.
Incredible. Okay, I'll throw things over to NK next.
Hello, my name's excuse me, NK Gutierrez. I'm an actor, filmmaker, humanitarian, and I am also the founder of Thickletic, an athleisure line that works to elevate the ideology around wellness inclusivity by cultivating conversation, clothing, and community. And I am in all of this space, people are always like, you do a million things. And what I know for certain is that it's 5 fingers on the same hand, and they all work holistically together. I'm also the operations director of Midwest Film Festival, the head programmer of XL Fest, and co-chair of Black Harvest Film Festival, along with heading up the film club at Soho House, Chicago. So I'm a champion of independent filmmakers, specifically independent storytellers, and overall human beings. And the space that I really come from and all that I do, the foundation of it is humanitarianism, right? And within that, the intersectionality of all of that, like we want to talk about adversity, diversity, working to remove the former so that we have more of the latter, all comes from being able to build bridges and being able to find ourselves in space. And what I know to be so, whatever it is you're pitching, whether it be a project, whether it be yourself, whether it be even in it's relationships, and it's showing up authentically. And from my perspective, none of it matters. You could be the smartest person in the room, you could be the most talented person in the room. But if you're not able to show up fully and do what I call hold space, make space, and be space, instead of taking up space to really be that space, then there's a huge opportunity missed. And I find often you don't get the results that you seek in the pitch that you are sharing. So we'll get more into that, but I'll let Edwin go next.
Thank you, NK, and thank you for having us today. Good evening. My name is Edwin Walker. I am a multi-hyphenated artist and creative, and I use the moniker E. Michaud, paying homage and following behind Oscar Michaud, who was a pioneer Black filmmaker at a time when a lot of Black voices weren't humanized. And what got me here today to speak with you about pitching is I started in the industry as a child at 12 as an actor, and I saw that there weren't a lot of people behind the scenes that looked like me. So at 18, I ended up, moving from my hometown of Chicago, Illinois to LA. And from there, I went through the journey of learning the ins and outs of Hollywood. And I've worked at Sony in development and acquisitions. And from there, I started a production company, amplifying independent creative voices and working by producing shows for Netflix, Comedy Central, Showtime, Fox. And that led me also to now cultivating and having spaces that now we talk about how do we pitch to new media. And I also work with a lot of artists. Myself am a visual artist. So when we really think about this space that we're in right now, I always say, how do you pitch innovation? And how do you pitch what someone else is not doing? And over my 20-year career within the industry, I've noticed that it's a constant learning how to adapt, but also figure out what are you going to give an innovative solution to someone in an effective manner for storytelling.
Okay, great. As you can see, we have a very talented and very busy panel with us today. So very, very fortunate that everybody made the time to come out here. So I've kind of picked up on a couple of things that you guys have said so far. So showing up authentically, making sure that you're bringing something that's a bit innovative to whoever you're pitching to and things like that. But I'm very curious to hear, like, at its very basic level, like, what are the components of a good pitch and what are the things that you need to hit in order to really convey an idea to investors? So I think I'll start with Melanie on this one, but of course, all of you are free to jump in any time. I'm just going with the person who did the pitch yesterday.
Yeah. Well, and I know, that I will tell part of the story. It depends on what you're pitching. That's the first thing, and also who you're pitching to. And but let's say for what I pitched the other day, it was it's called an open writing assignment. So which is different than if you're pitching your original work. So for the open writing assignment, there is IP that a major producer wants to develop into a film. And it also depends on where in the process you're coming into meeting with people. If it's a cold pitch where they've not read anything of yours, they don't know who you are, the most important thing to convey, I think, in a pitch for an open writing assignment is what NK was referring to, being authentic, being in that space as who you are and what you can bring to that project is the most important thing to convey. And part of that is just the conversation when you start talking to people. It isn't really even the meat of the pitch. That's important, and there are aspects of that, but really how you come as yourself into the room, into the space, whether it's in person or in Zoom, is really key, because a lot of the times, especially if they've read your work, but even if they haven't, they want to know, do you have two heads? Are you somebody who they can like live with and work with over a long period of time? So and also you don't want to try to pretend to be anything other than who you are and what you bring, because you don't want to accidentally bring something different and they wanted who you really were. And that's all you can bring to it. That's the best you can bring to the project. So for an open writing assignment, that's one of the first things. And then, and really knowing the IP that you're being asked to pitch on. And IP could be a comic book, it could be a story, it could be a book, it could be, sometimes it's just a kernel of an idea, a paragraph that they've sent you. And you want to have a real point of view and bring that point of view to the story. Take risks in your adaptation of whatever you would bring to the project. If it's you, there's so much to go into if it's original project, but I'll just briefly say, if it's an original project, it's you want to have a very strong log line. You want to have strong development of all the key characters. I personally think that you need to tell a little bit about the story in a short synopsis after your log line, and then dive into the characters, especially for television, because in television, if you don't care about the characters, if you don't know who the characters are, no one's going to watch it. No one's going to be interested in the project. So you've got to have, yes, you have to have a great premise, but those characters are key, and your point of view and passion and why you're telling that story, whether it's a film or television, those components, I would say, just to start us off, are the most important components.
Okay. Yeah, that felt very, very comprehensive. I feel like I've learned a lot already. I know, Edwin, you also have a lot of experience pitching, and one of the things that was really unique that we had discussed was like your pitching in like new media and for brand storytelling. So I know Melody had just mentioned that it really depends on like what kind of thing you're actually pitching. Is there anything that's particular to that style of pitching that you really need to bring to it that's a little bit different?
Yeah, I can just say to touch on what Melody just said, which was amazing. I got into the industry in 2002. So there wasn't social media, there wasn't YouTube, there wasn't anything that we had at our fingertips. So I've been around to see that it used to be just the four networks and then HBO and Showtime. So now we've gotten to a place where people's attention spans are shorter. So how we talk to people, how we engage with people all matters in the pitch. And over the past 6 years, I've transferred to um, unscripted, and I produced a film in 2018. And from that film, it turned into a documentary series. So it became Human Interest Stories. And from producing that film and caring about human interest stories, I also started meeting with certain brands that wanted to show how can we connect with people and show their story and connect their brand to people. And there are so many brands right now over the past couple of years that they want to show that they care about community. They want to show that they care about social justice. So I would tell anybody out there that is a writer and storyteller, don't just limit yourself to the quote unquote, TV film. Start, there's so many media agencies now that they look for, storytellers and ad agencies that can really bring in stories that humanize people, but also elevate the brand. And before you get those type of opportunities, I would suggest looking at the brand and looking up, what they're about and some of their previous works and putting your own spin on it. So I truly think that that's the new wave right now is in 15 to 20 years, how do we communicate with each other outside of TV and film, you know?
Yeah, and I think one thing that I've heard from both of you so far is this idea of like knowing who you're talking to, making sure you're doing your research before you get into the room. So I'm curious to hear from all of you actually, like what kind of things you think about before you get in there. So like what does the research and the prep look like beforehand, but also like how are you following up after? Like what is everything that comes after the pitch to make sure that you're really like sealing the deal there?
That's really good. And before we even move to that, I wanted to just double down on what Edwin said specifically about thinking about new media and communication through ad agencies, especially like for our film festival, Midwest Film Festival specifically, that one runs 10 months a year. And so we go up the last Monday of every month at the Gene Siskel Film Center in Chicago. And so and we have themes, and one of our themes is actually AdCom night, which is all about ads and commercials. So it's like the whole film festival on that particular month is dedicated to that specifically. And that, to be said, was like, it started out as a place for creatives who had kind of moved into the ad agency space, but were like, like I'm a filmmaker, and to be able to put up their work. And then me coming into this space, this is my first year working with this festival, being very specific because to your point, Edwin, was like how we're communicating. There's ads is the biggest way people are getting communicated with only always, right? And when you want to think through the lens of social justice, you want to think through the lens of equity, you want to think about who is communicating those stories and what stories do we want to be told and how we want them to be told, and being mindful that if that's the number one way that whispers are in people's ears, how do we turn that ear and that listening towards what we want to show up in the world? And we have the power to create that through that medium. So you want to be intentional. One, like, yes, can you be a creator in that space? What are the stories that you want being told in that space? And then going and knowing that that is an avenue and that is a place that people are doubling down on their dollars. So that's why it is very important to see how this organization or how these different brands have historically moved, because you don't want to be someone that's being used in that space in a way that's not in alignment with you or your values. So you want to see how they're moving and be clear on that, because what I will tell you for certain, if you leave with nothing else that we've told you today, remember this: what is for you will never miss you. What is for you will never miss you.
True.
And when you do the preparation and you are in deep alignment with who you are before you walk into the door to pitch anybody, even if the answer is a no, know that no, what that perceived rejection feels like in the moment is absolutely protection. And as long as you've done your research to be aligned with whomever it is that you're working to work with, whatever is meant to happen will happen if you've done the work. So when you're going in, there are very specific things that you do want to prep for, and I'm sure, and I will yield the floor for folks to talk about like the apps, like the things the metrics that you want to be hitting and have down on the paper or up in your pitch deck. But what I will say, because again, I was working from the holistic space of who you're showing up as before you walk through that door. What personal work have you done on yourself to know what you do and do not align with? And so, it was like Melody said, like, you don't want to walk in the room being yourself and you don't want to go in being somebody else, because that might be exactly who they were looking for and they missed it because you went in being somebody else. If you haven't done the personal work to show up powerfully and authentically, you're going to find yourself down the road working on something that you hate, working with people that you don't like, have your name attached to something that you feel shame, embarrassment, or guilt around. And money can't erase that. Status can't erase that. You go to bed with you every night. Nobody else. So you want to do that personal work. And that's honestly where Thickletic came from, was being like making sure you're taking care of your mind, body, and spirit. So to whatever you are creatively lending yourself to, you are doing it through a clear, clean vessel. And as an actor, you will know, anybody who's an actor in the space, there has to be a clarity in your vessel in order for whatever character you are creating to come through and to tell their story authentically, and untarnished, if you will. But to get deep into, I'll let someone else step into the very big specifics that you want to be writing down to make sure. And I'm right. I mean, if y'all aren't note takers or history makers, y'all. So I'm taking it on my, oh, that's good. Yeah. I was like, more character development underneath my synopsis. Thank you, Melody. So make sure y'all are taking notes.
Yeah. And I think to piggyback off of that, NK, I just had a pitch meeting with a kind of newer production company about a co-production, and we had a meeting with someone who was a larger production house. And always when you walk into authenticity, what I've learned, which has been successful for me, which is different for everyone else, is my icebreaker is always care about people, put people first. Hey, how are you? I know that this is, it's been a lot. And we're also in the industry are coming off of 6 months of a strike. So I always start with, are you happy to be back at work? I know it's overwhelming, but how are you? Are you feeling good? How you living physically, mentally, emotionally? And I noticed that some people will spark up because they're like, wow, you really care? And for me, working at Sony in development, we would sometimes have 50 pitch meetings in one day. So you're getting these stories and you're getting people and you really care about, some of these stories that stick out to you, but then you have an executive that's a higher up that someone else may have an overall deal or someone else may have an insight that this story is going to be harder to really fight for. So when you care about people, I think it goes a long way. And I always tell a few mentors that I have as well, look at your peer-to-peer network. And I've been to so many festivals and working at Sony. When I left and started my production company, I end up working with three other people who were at Sony at the time who've been doing well. And we do projects together and we're in alignment of caring about the work that we want to do because we're technically outside of a machine. But if I was there and if I kept wanting to get with like, oh my God, I got to stay with this producer, it would have took away from me building with them and really knowing that these are people that we 10, 15 years from now, we want to keep being impact makers within effective storytelling, impactful storytelling. So I truly champion for people to go into all of these spaces, caring about people and knowing that your peer-to-peer network matters. Sometimes it could be the assistant. In so many cases, the assistant to the executive or the person in development, in 10 years, they will be in charge. And if you are not nice to them, or if you don't follow up with them, or just do a good job of doing their admin, it'll go right in front of your eyes. So just really hone in on that authenticity and caring about people, because I've seen it go a long way for many people.
I 100% agree with that. And practically what helps with caring is knowing who you're pitching to, because if you want to know that for your pitch, it'll help with your pitch. It'll help tune your pitch because you're going to pitch differently to, let's say, a room full of people who are into science fiction, than a room full of people who are into social justice. You might fine tune your pitch. You're not going to change exactly essentially who you are and what the pitch is, but it's sometimes smart to do that. And you can do anything from, you should do your due diligence, read articles on whoever you're pitching to, look on, sometimes what I do, sometimes I look them up, I find, oh, they've done a panel. So I'll watch that YouTube video and listen to who they are, how they treat the other people around them. So you get a sense of who you're talking to, what their likes are, their passions are, so that you can really, you don't have to align yourself with them, but you can find what resonates for you that person would bring into the room. And then we have to remember that when we're going into these pitches, it's not just about them evaluating us. We need to be evaluating them, because everything I write is from a social justice perspective or climate justice perspective. And so I need to know that who I'm getting on board with is on board with who I am. So it's for you to also know who you're walking into the room with. So it's a co-evaluation. It's a partnership. That is the way you're in. It's not just about a business partnership, because it's that too. You should always look at it that way, but it's a soul partnership, right? It's an art partnership. And there's some things you got to learn. Where's the give and take? Are you going to work on a violent show because maybe you could bring something new to the way in which that audience sees violence, or something you can inject something new into the story? I was brought on board on Law and Order SVU right after George Floyd, and they had read a play of mine, NBC, and they had already decided they wanted to work with me. And then when George Floyd happened, they're like, "Oh, we don't have a Black person in this room, and the cop show really should have a Black person." And there were a number of organizations that approached me and said, "Please be on the show. Please do this, because we need to have a Black woman on a show that's about, Law and Order SVU is about, women survivors of sexual violence." And I was like, no. I just wrote an article that was anti-police and you don't want me. My brother is Christian Cooper, who was that Central Park birder, who that woman made that call to the police to try to get him, basically, in my opinion, hurt, killed. And I had been raging against that and on TV saying what I didn't like about that. So, but then I met the showrunner, and Warren Leight was very progressive and wanted to really shake up the show. And I did my due diligence, and I reached out to one of the Black writers who in the past had written on the show and worked with Warren. And she said, "If you have a chance to work with him, do it. It is going to be the best experience, and he will let you bring something to it." And when I got in the room, not only was it it was a lot of women in the room, one Latino who became my best friend. And when I had to pitch my story, I said, "God, this show is the longest running show in US television, 22 years when I was on it." And I said, "What am I going to pitch that's going to be different? They haven't done before." So I said, "No, they must have done a lot of missing Black women. They've done that before, obviously. So maybe I'll do the third version of that." And I pitched my story about missing Black women. They had never done an episode that was focused on missing Black women before.
Wow.
And so I said, aha, this is what I'm bringing to this. And I found out 40% of the audience for that show are Black women. Who knew? So even when you're not sure, is this going to align with who I am or what I can bring? There's different ways of thinking about that. So I just offer that as just making sure that not only you know who you are, you know who they are. I normally would not have ever done that show, but after meeting Warren Leight, who's a playwright and a wonderful showrunner, and the room was wonderful, I said, there's value. And I got to produce my episode, got to on set, and he was very supportive of my doing that. So it's, you really have to know what you're walking into.
Oh, that's so good, Melody. Thank you for sharing that. It just gets like, there's so many things I hope that y'all heard in her share. One of which was like networking across. And when I say that, it's because you were able to talk to someone who was like, no, if you know that, like, because you had a relationship and someone's like, no, don't say no to this because I know this person. It was because you had a relationship with somebody that knew somebody else that you trusted. And what I heard even before is that you weren't afraid to say no, because no is sexy, right? And you said no, and the no can always, like, here's the thing, it was like, it's like consent. You can always give consent and you could always revoke consent. Remember that, y'all. So you can take it and you can give it. And so you can always change your mind. It's not a tattoo. And even those you can get rid of these days. So, hey, but the point being is that simply because a big sassy name came along, she wasn't like, okay, yes, I'll abandon everything else because I definitely want to have my name attached to this thing that's been on the air for 20 years. It was a no. Right. And so that's the thing. And I hope that everyone gets from this panel by the end, because you can go anywhere and you can get the X, Y, and Z of what a pit, like the bones of what a pitch needs to be and all of these different things. You're gonna be able to get that anywhere, but who you're showing up as and the permission to do so, I hope that you take that away with you, because that's gonna be more than just in the room of pitching. It's gonna be how you show up in your life. And that's what we need people doing right now. That's how we need people moving and activating in space, is with their feet solidly on the ground, being able to look through all the things and see what is aligned with them, and then to create forward in that power. And being able to look at, like, how do you shift these narratives in the room? How do you, a show that's been on the air for 2 decades and and the very women that they are serving, as in 40% of those eyes that are in that space, the work isn't reflecting them, and we're still showing up and watching him. So what happens when the work actually does reflect you? What shifts in the world? What changes? I'm just crazy enough to believe that this thing that we do can change the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I
I
think the biggest, I want to tap on this really quick. The biggest takeaway from that is advocating for yourself, is what Melody kind of said. And I think what NK said earlier. And as a writer, and when you're pitching something as a producer, as a director, you create the world. But when you create the world, what I've noticed, especially in a time that we're living in the fight for humanity, is please let me tell you my lived experience and also my shared experience. Because if you don't understand me and where I'm coming from, then you're expecting me to minimize myself, minimize my voice, and be something that I'm not. And in many of those cases, I've turned down writers' room because, like I said, I moved to LA in 2008. There were no Isas, there were no Avas, there were no, that just did not exist. So I had to go into those spaces and didn't feel comfortable. And because I didn't feel comfortable there, I had to start looking at what is my shared experience as a young Black man. And then also, how do I go to places that are going to allow me to amplify voices that, like what you said, Melody, if I'm serving this group of people and you're not allowing me to be true to that, that's an oxymoron. So I really think if anybody's out there taking notes, when you advocate for yourself, you're looking at, am I going to be valued here? And even I'll end on this. I'm one of the creative directors for JD Sports, and me coming in, working with this brand and telling the story, I always say you can't just talk to people, especially Black people, have been looked at to be cool, hip. And one of the ladies in charge, she said that I really think Black people are so cool and hip, and that's what we want this campaign to be geared towards. And I said, well, what about the young designers who are brilliant? They're beyond cool and hip. Their story is because they never felt seen. And so many of the designers that we've been interviewing and doing stuff behind, they've been to institutions that they didn't get a chance to express themselves in the best artistic way. And now they're advocating for themselves. Now they're understanding this is why I need to have spaces that will allow me to thrive and be the best version of me. And that should be in your pitch.
Mhm.
So one thing that I'm curious about just hearing from all of you talk, because I think there's so much value in staying authentic and really making sure that projects are aligned with you and your values. But I also know that like the industry can be very difficult, especially right now. It can be very tough trying to find your footing in it. So I was wondering if you guys have ever struggled to turn down a project because you're not sure when the next opportunity is coming up, and how you handle like um, maintaining that moral integrity when you're not really sure what your future in the career looks like.
Oh, I can hop on that. um, to continue on the Law and Order SVU story, I was asked back for the next season, but the response to the season that Warren had guided right after George Floyd, because we were told by NBC, please lean in to that storyline, which actually ended up being part of the season in a few episodes. We were told that our season was too woke. Those words were used, and there was too much George Floyd. And the Black police chief, the actor who played the Black police chief, that character, he was fired, that character taken away. And the bisexual Middle Eastern character was also fired and taken away. And those are the two that I had planned to, I talked to those actors to develop their storylines and their characters. And it felt like a gut punch to me. And I said, this, for me, I'm going to make the decision to turn down being asked back. And even in retrospect, it sounds crazy because network television, you make a lot of money. Okay. And I loved the room and I loved the showrunner, but I made, and I was lucky because I had just been hired to write a feature film for Netflix. And I was pitching with Will Packer, a show to Netflix that we ended up selling. So financially, I knew that I could afford to make that decision to say, I love everybody in the room, Warren, I love you, but I cannot move forward because this is outside of what I see myself writing. And it was a hard decision to make, but I felt I needed to do it. not everybody can be in the position to do that. So I had a friend who was on a show. I won't name the show, but it had a horrible showrunner. It ended up in the news. It ended up in the news, but it ended up that showrunner ended up being dragged finally by the news because people stepped forward, but she couldn't afford to leave the show. So she had to stay. And the way in which she dealt with it was that she had those of us who were her support system around her, who she could talk to, who she could work through, like what it was that wasn't working for her, how to find a way to deal with the toxicity in a way that allowed her to preserve who she was and not go crazy. She also spoke out and found the ways that she could speak out to WGA, and wherever you are, there should be a union that allows you to protect yourself and speak out. So you seek out those who you can talk to, who can support you. It can be delicate as to how you leave a show. You do it with, and I did it in a way that to make sure that I was respecting those who I loved working with. And I did it with grace, and I had agents and managers, and we talked it through. I didn't go up in someone's office and say, the hell with you. You don't even, I didn't do it that way, because you want to preserve your own integrity. But that integrity can also mean, as NK said, saying no. And and sometimes you do have to do it. It can cost you, and you just have to decide when and how you can do it. And it's you, and reaching out to I reached out to several people to ask them, how should I handle this? This is who I am, and I can't move forward. What should I do? How should I handle this? So reaching out to others, mentors, people who've been through it before, all of that is helpful.
Yeah. And it's okay to be independent and not have a machine behind you. And why I'm a / multi hyphenated is because I know I have to stand for something. And I've been told so many times. I left Hollywood living there after 14 years, 2 years ago during the pandemic, and moved back to my hometown of Chicago and been working in Brooklyn and New York. But I knew that after a while of being told that I have core values and I stand for something, and I don't want to write on a show or direct and produce something that is perpetuating violence or perpetuating stereotypes, then you do have people that are like, oh, well, you're difficult to work with. How am I difficult to work with if this is what I stand on and what I believe? So the power of independent, what my last thing that I want to leave everyone on the Zoom with is that for the past 5 years, not only have I been able to work with major artists and work with people who are like, you know what, I want to do this independently. I don't want to do this with someone telling me what to do and how to do it. And going to art institutions, and even NK can talk about what we're building at the Excel Festival. It's literally in Midwest Film Festival, with so many stories of people that they just need spaces and they need opportunity. And when you have those spaces and opportunities, the more we stick together, the more we build together, we don't have to compromise our integrity. And through my career, I refuse to. And some of that money I just walk away from. I walked away from writer rooms that I just didn't feel like I was valued. And now I know my worth, my value, and also I can do it independently. And if a man named Oscar Michaud can do it in 1920s and so many other people before me whose shoulders I stand on, then why can't I? And so can you.
That's so good. And to that point, it's getting like, so for instance, there was an announcement, I think it went out on Tuesday, yes, that Sundance Film Festival is coming to descend upon Chicago and do an activation this summer, which I'd known about prior and had been in some conversations with, and then it was announced and I was able to actually like start talking about it. But in those meetings that I was those preliminary meetings that I was having with Sundance, I said exactly what I've seen to be so, even with, it was like talking about being a multi-hyphen, and I think is so important. It was like, because I became a filmmaker and a producer because I needed to start greenlighting myself. Yes. And as an actor, which I'm an actor first, and I love acting, and all, it was like, I'm auditioning darn near every day lately, and I love it. And I'm a better actor because I'm a producer and a director as well, because I understand, like, there was something missing for me, and not being able to have a seat at the table of talking about, like, because I see the things and I need to be able to move the things and write the things and direct the things. And when I say direct the things, it's not just even in directing, what's happening in front of the camera, but directing the folks behind the camera while we're creating the thing, right? So going back to the Sundance thing, what I had said on that call, because I think it's so interesting, especially because XL Fest we've been working on for a few years, and I've worked Troy Pryor, who is the creator of XL Fest and Creative Cipher, and we've been working together for years. And then even in taking this role at Midwest Film Festival as director of operations, which I said no to twice, by the way, just so we're like talking about, like, I was courted to be the executive director, and I said no. And I was like, if I'm going to be scraping together coins for anything, it's going to be the thing I've been working on for 18 business years, not anybody else's organization that has been historically white.
Yes.
Guess what? They're like, what do we need to do? We know we need to move forward, and we want you here. And we know we can't move forward without you in the way that we want to. So what needs to happen? And they created the director of operations for me to be able to do. And I was like, and to do it in a way that I wanted to do it, and for it to truly reflect the Midwest, which is a mosaic of human beings. And that, and and the people that are in charge, the executive director is incredible. And she's like, whatever you say, I say, whatever I say, like, we are one, united in doing this thing. And that's what needed to happen for me to feel powerful to do it. Otherwise, I was ready. Even when I had the interview with the board, the last thing I said was exactly what I said to y'all. I was like, I told him, I was like, I will make my labor clear to you. This is what I will do. This is what I will not do. And I move at the speed of trust. I invite you to do the same. And at the end of this, if you feel that this is not a fit, what I know for certain is what is for me will never miss me. Thank you. Good night. I was in a car in a Taco Bell parking lot because I was producing another film that I was working on in the middle of nowhere, and there was no reception. So I was on my computer in the car with Taco Bell sign in the background. Because guess what? I know what I was like. I'm here. I'm doing what I can, and I know my value, and I'll show up powerfully in it. I say all that to say, now I have this role. All of a sudden, not that I didn't have the doors open for me before, but it's like, NK, oh my gosh, NK. Because I have this title. I'm like, nothing changed but these little letters under my name. I've been doing the same thing I've been doing for like 2 decades dang near. Okay. So when you think about that, you think about the power of a name and this thing getting behind. And I was like, it's so funny to me that now suddenly it's like, oh, we're listening fully, like whatever I have to say. Right. So in this meeting with Sundance, I said the same thing. I was like, you're coming to Chicago. We already know what we do. We don't need, like, we know what we about. We know how we do things. And I was like, and what you can do is pass the mic. Utilize your name to uplift what's already happening here. Put the global eyes on it so they can see, because you wouldn't be coming here if you didn't think it was dope. Right? And I say that to say whatever it is you're thinking about, it's like you're the one bringing the value to the space when you are operating in your gift. And you would do so. And I say that I want you to hear that when you're operating in your gift and you have done the work. So don't think like, well, I'm just me, so I'm gonna come in here and boom, boom, boom. It's not that. You got to do the work. You've got to be, everything, the preparation, and to be in your gift and to be a master of your gift. And when you are doing that and then you show up fully in that gift, you are the one bringing what needs to be brought to the table that no one else can bring. But there are all these different opportunities and these names that will come along. And what you're looking for is alignment, and you're looking for it to be a mutually beneficial situation. Right. But I want to get clear on, it's like these titles and these names can take you in many directions. And I invite you to utilize it for the good of the world and yourself. And then when you're doing the work, you're moving forward in integrity. So all that to say, like, it just, you're coming in a space of knowing your power and knowing who you're working with and being in that and not being afraid to say no. And sometimes you do say no, and you will be in a place where, like, well, I mean, I was in a place last year, I was like, are we going on strike now? Wow. Okay. Don't know how do we need to Uber Eats? So like, what do I need to do? Like, oh my gosh. Like, and I have never was like, what do I do? And there were still things that I was just willing. There was a couple things that came across my desk that I was like, nah. And I was like, I've lost my mind because I don't know where the next thing is going to come from. But I bet on me always. As a artist, that's what you're doing. You're betting on yourself. So you toe the line. I think Melody, had a great point of like the person who had to stay in that job. It's like anything else, like you're working that job that is going to keep the roof over your head for that amount of time. And it could be in a writing room, it could be Uber Eats, whatever it is. But so you're always choosing where, you know, like where you've got to toe the line, and also being in full commitment to yourself.
Yeah, I wanted to speak on that too, about what both you and Edwin talked about, you know, mastering your gift and investing in yourself. Because people used to call me, so many people in the industry have called me a unicorn, because I'm a Black woman who writes sci-fi and horror. It's like, oh, that doesn't exist. You're a unicorn. We want to get you in the room, because we don't see any of that. And there are plenty of us who write and direct sci-fi and horror. We're just not getting the bigger opportunities. But it's interesting because Lucasfilm brought me in, and they said something to me that was the first time I'd heard that. They said they had shows that were BIPOC shows and that they were considering me for, right? But they said, we don't want to just consider you for those. We want to consider you for all of our shows, because we want your voice in those other rooms as well. And that's beginning. So things are beginning to shift. But one of the ways in which any of you who write, like, I started writing short stories during the strike, because I said, I have this anxiety disorder. I need to work on several things to feel calm. So with the strike on, I just started adapting. And the first ones were not very good. I was adapting some of my own films, but there are two that are going to be published soon. So I've gotten IP now that's going to be published. And I write a comic book. I've written 3 comic books. That's IP that I can maybe sell, and that shows who I am. Executive produced, I directed my own films, but executive produced others' films. So you're building your network, and like NK said, you know, whatever else you're doing in the industry, the fact that I direct helps me as a writer. The fact that I act helps me as a director. It all pulls together so that you're multifaceted. You're just shining up that jewel so that you shine brighter. And so reaching out to, you know, making sure that you create the world, the IP and what you can do, and not wait for it to come to you. And that's NK and Edwin are doing that. And I started something called the NYX Horror, NYX, the Queen of the Night, NYX Horror Collective, because I felt that the women horror writers and directors weren't really getting elevated the way they should be. And instead of just all of us sitting around talking and complaining, I produced 2 short film programs that were on Shutter Channel. So I said, we need to get the work out there. We need to know what it looks like to see our work on a screen. And so any of that you can do, and it didn't cost a lot of money to do that. I mean, there are times when you do, yes, you have to put up money, but there are ways in which we can get our IP and get paid for it and get our work out there, so we can be seen in all the ways that all the strengths that we have, all the gifts that we have can be seen, and we don't have to wait to try to say, please see me as a sci-fi writer, please see me as a horror writer. I don't have to approach it from the please see me. I can just put my work out there. And it's like, you want to come? You want to be a part of this? All right, it's here. And I think it just feels better to work from that place, I think.
Yeah, that's incredible. I feel like I'm hearing a lot of really wonderful things from you guys this evening. So about like showing up authentically and making sure that you're picking projects that align with you and your values, and you know, making sure that you have a support network, and there are ways that you can navigate when you have to accept projects that aren't, but also finding ways to do things independently and continue to you know, put your efforts towards the things that you're interested in doing and that bring you joy and really are in the vein of what you want to be doing. And also the power of everything that you guys have been doing as you're multi-hyphenated, you're writing, acting, producing, all sorts of things. And so I know that we're coming up a little bit towards time, but I would really love to hear from you guys, especially like what key advice do you have for our audience, especially folks who might be newer into the industry and really are just starting to find their footing with all of this stuff.
I guess I'll start. I'll keep it short and brief. Just be you. Be you, and know that they are waiting on your story. And when we look at a lot of these spaces, you look at the BAFTAs, you look at the Academy Awards, you look at the Emmys, for there to not be you know, we see the first in so many years, the first person of color and this and that. I think being a marginalized group of people, we are worthy, we are good enough, and now we just have to stay true to us and we don't need to bend. We need to literally bulldoze. Don't bend, bulldoze straight ahead and say, this is me. Don't change, perfect and hone your craft and make sure that you are uniquely your most authentic self. That's what I leave you with.
That's good. And I would say education, education, education. You always want to be perfecting your craft, whatever it might be. So be in the work. You need to be practicing and logging. Like the biggest piece of advice I got when I first came to Chicago and was, which I thought I was only going to be here for 2 years and then make my way to New York. And here we are like 19 years later. Um, was that you need to be logging hours. I mean, as an actor, if you're an actor, you need to be at the theater. You need to be watching films. You need to be in class. You need to be watching it. You need to be doing it. You need to be being in it only always. And I have found too, is like, so I've studied in London, I've studied in New York, I've studied in LA, studied in Atlanta. I always go, if there's a market I'm even considering being a part of, the first thing I do is take class. I find out where I can take a class in that space because I want to get present to what's happening in the market. I want to get present to the type of people that are in the market and the energy of the market. And I feel the easiest way to do that is to get in class and community. And I love to learn. So, and I love structure in that way. I don't like to be told what to do and be my own thing. And then I like structure in like learning. So, you know, you find those things in guardrails for yourself, like what really enlivens you. But I can't stress enough the importance of being in the practice of your work. And was like, I just finished a 4-week acting class on Tuesday that I was taking with a mentor of mine that I've been taking class with since 2008 and then hadn't for years, but I'm always just looking for a class. So I highly, highly recommend, and it always even, especially when you're in survival jobs or doing things that, getting you from point A to point B, and that when you can at least be in a class or do something, there's so many courses that you can be taking. Even if it's online, just to keep you in the work, it'll keep you inspired and it'll remind you of what you're doing and who you are. Because there'll be seasons when you're like, am I an artist? Because I've been pushing groceries more than I've been, like putting pen to paper. So you've got to be in the practice of putting pen to paper even before, or, fingers to keyboards, whatever, however you write, before the opportunity comes, because that's where you got to be in that space of creation. So that's what I leave you with. That's my biggest piece of advice.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would add to that it's, writing is a very singular activity. Sometimes we're on our own a lot, and I would say an important thing is to build your tribe. Make sure that you build your network of support, those who support you and who you're supporting, people who will end up hiring you or you might end up hiring. The people who are on right now in this Zoom, the people who are your mentors, and to really keep the flow of that, and to make sure you stay in touch with the people who have given you something and you have something to give to. And know that for pitching, even if you don't get the job, every pitch is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to expand your network. You could be the best writer that they've come across, but just one of the executives just preferred choosing somebody else because they knew them from before, and they're going to keep you in mind. I've been brought back for jobs because of how I pitched, how I brought myself and my work into a pitch. So that's all part of expanding your network, and it's really important to do. But your personal network, aside from the business of it, it's going to be your core. It's what's going to help sustain you. So make sure that you reach out and you develop your tribe.
Amazing. So I think we're coming up about to the hour, so we'll have a little bit of time to do a little bit of a wrap up for all of TNB Expo, because we've been running sessions for the past 4 days or so. We started out with our launch on Monday, and then we had 3 full days in person and online today with Expo. So I know some folks have been asking about socials. I think our lovely panelists have been kind enough to provide those in the chat as well, but I will just put up a slide really quickly with just everybody's little deets, hopefully, if I can find the right one. So Melody Cooper at Melody Cooper Film, and Kay has put her Instagram handles in the chat, as well as you can find her on LinkedIn. And then Edwin is at the Edwin Walker with 3 E's. If you'd like to follow BYP Network, that's at BYP Network on Instagram, and the New Black Film Collective. We're also at TNB FC. You can also find us on Facebook. That's where we're live streaming right now, I believe, and everything like that. And then my other thing is just if you would like to sign up to Javelin to gain all of the benefits of the AI-powered platform by BYP, you can scan the QR code right here just to get connected with that. And I also said I would leave the thing in the chat, so I will do that immediately. But yeah, thank you guys so much for joining us. At the moment, I think we're going to try to connect with the folks on the stage very shortly because our last session there is also wrapping up. So we'll just kind of bring the online day into the in-person day. And I will turn things over to Nikki right now, just to do a few couple of like final words for us before we kind of bring all of that together. So again, thank you so much, Melanie and Kay and Edwin, for joining us for our Black Hollywood session, and for the incredible advice that you've given to all of our attendees today. I think folks really, really appreciate it. I know that I did, and I learned so much from all of you and all of the phenomenal work that you're doing, for sure.